Here it is, the roadmap to bluegrass slash country fiddle mastery. So this is my pedagogy on paper, everything I've thought of that has got me where I am today in terms of things I personally work on, and it's also broken into it's sequential, so it's an order of things that I've learned. Now, to describe this kind of looking at it for the first time, what I'm saying here is that there are three branches of kind of what makes the country bluegrass fiddler, right? One is his understanding or usage of scales or colors or however collections of notes, however you refer to it or think about it, and then how and understanding how melodies are constructed. So that's one branch of this kind of fiddle mastery, right? Another branch of it, which is a separate branch from melody and scales, is harmony, the broad category of harmony. Now, harmony we express on our instrument through chords or arpeggios or double stops, right? So everything that has to do with playing multiple notes or expressing harmony on our instrument or chords is going to be under this category, and that's an important category in bluegrass and country music, where it's not an important category in genres where you're not playing accompaniment. So like Celtic and Celtic music and old time music. A lot of people aren't thinking about this category. So this is a very important category to understand, and the sequence is very important here as well. The final branch is bowing slash melodic rhythm. So this is where these bowing, scales, and rhythms. These two branches are going to apply to broadly to almost all fiddle styles. So old time and Celtic music, a lot of it's going to use similar bowings and melodic rhythms. Melodic rhythms is just common rhythms that happen within that genre. So if you're trying to play funk and rock fiddle, right, then there'd be a different set of melodic rhythms or ways of using your bow that would apply to playing those genres successfully. So this is specific to kind of bluegrass and country, and a lot of that is similar to Celtic and other music. So that's this category here. All right, that's the kind of starting point, right? We understand there's three branches of this, and each of these I wrote out sequentially what I'd recommend working on in terms of what would help you most in each of these areas. So ideally, a person who was starting off would be working on these three things, right? If I was a very first fiddle lesson with someone who wanted to learn to play bluegrass and country fiddle, I would start at step one of each of these categories and try to get a little bit of each of these in the lessons, right? So we're trying to understand the feel of the music by working on the essential shuffle bowings, getting the feel of the music into our bow. I would actually even start before we actually play the shuffle bowings. I would get the sound of them in our head, and I would help a person kind of feel the rhythm of the music and understand how it's different from pop and rock music. At the same time, I would make sure that every time a G chord happens, that they had at least one way to play a G chord on their instrument, right? There's an infinite number of ways with double stops, but if you're just starting, that's overwhelming. You want to have a go-to way to play a G chord, a C chord, D chord, etc., right? And I would make sure that that person has a go-to shape for every chord that occurs in whatever jam setting they are. So if they're in a jam that plays in B flat and B, then before they move to step two, they need to know a go-to chord shape for B and for B flat and F and the kinds of chords that occur in that before they start working on this kind of next step, right? And then over here, pentatonic scales, you've heard me talk about this over and over again, just being king to learning how melodies live before we even kind of, obviously you can be learning melodies along the way, and you should be, but the pentatonic scales are really what's going to help you the most in terms of how melodies are constructed, and also being able to improvise and play backup. All right. So as we go down the road here, once a person has kind of gotten through the step one, they can kind of move forward in any of these. But again, the idea is to kind of move like this down the chart. All right. So after the person has kind of gotten those down, the next thing they do, the next logical thing would be to add the blues note to the major blues scale. So that's adding that one extra note, changing the scale from this to this. All right. That's a very easy transition. It's a pretty quick one for people that have gotten that down. I should mention I did skip this. With scales, we want to, you've heard me talk about the 4-finger pattern, so being able to play those scales starting on each finger, right? After the go-to chord shapes are there, you could say, well, I'm bored with playing a B chord the same way or a G chord the same way all the time, right? And so you take a look at the Essential Bluegrass Double Stops, which is a video and a PDF I have of all the possible ways you can play a G chord, a C chord, a D chord, etc. Right? And that's just like a very academic way of getting the answers to those questions. How else can I do it? Right? And then shuffle bowings, understanding the groove of the music is a great first step. There are other ways that you can express that groove, i.e. chopping. So chopping is kind of like a rhythmic technique, just like a shuffle bow. But it usually requires a basic understanding of the feel of music before someone can successfully find where the chop goes. So that's why it's number 2 on this sort of thing. 3 here is the minor pentatonic. So this gets you access to kind of the bluesy or darker side of the music. We have unisons and octaves, which are actually double stops that are not included in this document here. It's just other, there's, G, D, A, and E we can play as unisons and octaves on our instrument. Well, that's just another way of expressing a double stop that isn't within this document here, as are the later ones here. But the third one here, so this is shuffle bowings plus moving notes and adding neighbor tones. That's where we get from here to here. All right, so when we take just static shuffles to moving shuffles. Yep. Moving down the line here, adding one note to the minor pentatonic scale gives you the minor blues scale. Getting that sort of sound, right? Lane practice is where you kind of quiz your understanding of these 2 steps by holding yourself to just 2 strings at a time. You play through a song, play through the chords, and as the chords come up, you ask yourself, are you able to play a C chord over a C, or a C double stop over a C chord on your A and E string, right? Well, it's just sort of a way of kind of quizzing your knowledge up to here. Swing bowings is when you get to the swing influence of music. There's a little bit of different ways that the bow is being used, so that we get there. Next step here, learning melodies starting on each finger. This is kind of where we apply a lot of this stuff. Melodies are made up of these, and so we want to learn how melodies live by kind of working them in different keys. This is expanding on the basic double stops of unisons and major chords, and we add some flat 7s and 9s. And that's kind of how we get some of the blues element there. There's certain rhythms that happen in this music that are important to know, like do-da, boo-da, or da-da-dee-da, or da-da-ga-da-da-ga. Some of these, will occur out of the shuffle bowings, but some of them are not. That just occur in a lot of tunes that are important to know, right? This is a variation on learning melodies. This is just taking licks and then transcriptions, so people's solos and things like that. Same idea, but it's a little bit more advanced melodies, right? This is something that this is another way to play double stops that includes the 6th, and it gives you a kind of more swingy feel over the chords. It's used a lot in jazz, or swing influenced music. This is where we incorporate elements of rhythmic tension, so we can create a feeling of the blues through note choice, but also through our rhythm choices. And that's what that's all about there. Over here, this is where we start to get out of pentatonic towards the major scale, but not quite there yet. A major scale is 7 notes, a hexatonic scale is 6, so this is just adding a passing note to help us incorporate a little bit more notes from the pentatonic scale, a little bit more color. Pentatonic scales are more neutral, and this gives us a little bit more color depending on where we choose that. This is the final step of harmony, is where we do triple stops, 3 notes at once, and that's you'll hear that in Vassar licks, or sometimes double shuffles or trick shuffles and things like that, which is the last thing here. There's little party trick shuffles that you can add to your thing here. And then the final one in the melody category is micro improvisation, so taking little phrases or musical ideas and being able to vary them and play them in 5 to 10 different ways. That is the roadmap to country bluegrass fiddle mastery.